Hello, my name is Stephen Upton and welcome to my YouTube channel. The Battle of Hill 70 took place between the 15th and 25th of August 1917. The Canadian Corps executed an operation to capture Hill 70 and then established defensive positions from which combined small arms and artillery fire would repel the expected German counterattacks. 10 battalions from the 1st and 2nd Canadian Divisions led the attack, which started at 04:25 hours on the 15th of August. Supported by artillery firing thousands of shells in a creeping barrage, the Canadian infantry swept through the German forward lines, cresting Hill 70 and advancing down the other side. Within an hour, most objectives had been secured and Hill 70 was in Canadian hands. There are two memorials that should be visited. An older one, which is on the summit of Hill 70, and the new Hill 70 Memorial, which is situated just behind where the Canadian front lines were. This red arrow shows you the new Hill 70 Memorial. Moving over to the right, that is the summit of Hill 70, so the space in between those two markers is the battlefield over which the Canadians advanced. This is the old Hill 70 Memorial, but unfortunately it's situated right on the end of a runway. You see where the red arrow is, the runway is right next to it. That means I couldn't fly my drone very close to this area. This is the new Hill 70 Memorial. Moving in the direction the Canadians would have advanced, there's a clump of trees that are just marked there now. That is Seaforth Crater. To the right of that, through that ploughed field, those white splodges were where there were other craters. Looking now on a 1917 trench map, Seaforth Crater marked with the arrow, and that is also the direction the Canadians would have advanced. So at the time in question, these craters were no longer in no man's land, they were just behind the Canadian front line. We move to the air now, and looking backwards, the direction the Canadians would have advanced from. In the distance, that looks like a pyramid, is actually a slag heap. In reality, it's two slag heaps. We're looking at it side on, and they were known as the Twin Kraziers during the war. The Germans occupied those for most of the war. Hill 70 new memorials in the foreground, and top left-hand corner now is the Loos Cemetery. Most of the graves in this cemetery date from September 1915 and the Battle of Loos. The battle for Hill 70 was nearly 2 years later. Since 1915, the village of Loos has grown quite dramatically, as you would expect. But as we pan round in a moment to the right, we're going to be looking over the 1915 battlefield towards where the British front line would have been. The British would have advanced in the direction of the camera. Throughout these films, when I refer to British, I'm generally referring to all British and Commonwealth forces. It's just that it's a bit of a mouthful to keep repeating everybody that took part. So now you can see on the horizon would have been the British front line, and this would have been the Loos battlefield. And this is the village of Loos. The new Hill 70 Memorial is situated just on the edge of Loos village. The orientation for the attack in 1917 is actually completely different. It's almost like they panned round through 90 degrees to the left as the front lines changed over those 2 years, and the advance now moves in the direction the camera is panning. You can see Seaforth Crater, those clump of trees in the middle there. And in a moment I'll just highlight that with an arrow, and we're just moving the direction towards Hill 70. That's Seaforth Crater. And the Canadian front line on the eve of the attack was just the other side of Seaforth Crater, and that arrow showed the direction of the assault. Unfortunately, I can't fly much further towards Hill 70 due to there being an active airfield. And for some strange reason, they don't like us flying drones over them, and we have to respect that. Joking apart though, we have to be very sensible when flying drones that we don't cause a problem. But this is Seaforth Crater. At one time, the British front lines were to the left and the German front lines to the right. That's shown upon this map, which is a bit older. That red arrow shows my takeoff point for the drone, and you can see Seaforth Crater to the right there in no man's land. But back to the air now. That's Seaforth Crater. That would have been no man's land. The Germans just the top off camera and the British lines just below. After the Canadian infantry captured Hill 70, the infantry and the engineers quickly consolidated their new positions and prepared to defend them. The real fight began late on August the 15th, when German reinforcements counterattacked to try to reclaim Hill 70. But the Canadians were ready. Over the next 4 days, the Germans would launch 21 separate counterattacks. None of them succeeded, and the Canadians held their ground. Over 20,000 Germans were killed trying to retake Hill 70. This battle also saw the first use of mustard gas. The Germans fired over 15,000 shells at the Canadian artillery to try to slow them down. However, the Canadian gunners kept firing, and 183 of them heroically sacrificed themselves so the guns would not stop. That arrow points to Hill 70, the summit. If you look at it, when they talk about hills in the First World War, you can barely see it as a hill. It's a slight rise in the ground. But these hills were strategically so important to either side, hence the effort taken to capture them. I hope this film has been of interest. If you are interested in the First World War, please consider subscribing to my channel. And as with all of my films, they are made in the memory of all those who served, and this particular one dedicated to the Canadian infantry and artillery and the airmen who captured Hill 70. We will remember them.